I'm going to start talking about the median from the perspective of what we want it to mean, and then we'll talk about mathematically, well, what does that have to mean then in terms of how I would calculate or find this number, okay? So what we want the median to tell us is that a median represents where about half of my data is less and half is more. So if I'm told that the median salary here in Casper is $60,000, then I would know that half of people would make less than that and half make more. Very easy to interpret and totally fits in with what our idea of center in this section should really mean, right? Right, and the mean was literally a center of mass, but sometimes like that physical interpretation is not very easy to understand. This idea of center is truly like the center of our data. So how would I actually find where the middle is? Well, if I actually just organize my data going from the smallest number to the largest number, and I find the middle value, right? So I've got it basically numerically ordered from smallest to largest, and I find that middle value, well, then half my data is going to be less and half is going to be more. So that's how I'd calculate this thing. And again, the idea is we're starting with an intuitive sense of what we want this to mean, and then we figure out how we would calculate it from there. Okay, so it's this value in the middle when data is put in order, and the idea here is that about half of the values are going to be less and half are more. Okay. However, as soon as I say it's the value in the middle when the data is put in order, we come across an immediate problem, okay? And that is that I'm only going to have a true middle number when I've got an odd number of data points. Okay, so let me just illustrate that real quick here, right? With just 1, 2, 3. All right, so this is an odd number of data points. I've got 3 values here, okay? And 2 is the middle one. Okay, so that's my median. Easy enough to find, but because it's easier to find, it seems like always there's some problem. And here the problem is that my interpretation kind of goes out the window. I said half is going to be less than that and half is going to be more. Well, actually, only a third of it is less and a third is more. Now, usually when we're doing this stuff, we have big data sets, right? And so if I had, 3,000 data points here, the fact that I'm not strictly like exactly 50%, right? It's going to be like 49.99% is less, 49.99% is more. So we can still interpret it as basically half is less and half is more, except when I have these very tiny data sets. Okay, well, let's talk about what if I had an even number of data points here. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So I've got 4 values, which is an even number. The middle would be right there. There is no number right there, right? If I picked 2, I'd have 2 values more and only 1 value less. That's not the middle. If I picked 3, I'd have 2 values less and 1 value more. That's not the middle either. So what do I do when I have an even number of data points and I don't really have a number that's right in the middle for me to pick? Well, what I do is I actually find the midpoint of these 2 middle numbers. So it turns out that the average of 2 numbers is the midpoint. So what I actually do here is I take my 2 and my 3 and I average them. My marker's running out of ink here, but I've got, if I average 2 and 3, that's 2 plus 3. 2 plus 3 divided by 2, right? So that's 5 divided by 2, 2.5. So that's going to be my median, 2.5. Okay. Now, although that was more annoying because I actually have to calculate it instead of just finding the number here, I actually have the true interpretation of a median. Half the numbers are less than that, and half are more. So, each has pluses and minuses, but that's how you calculate it. You have to know how many data points you have in order to correctly calculate that median, When it's an odd number of data points, it's truly just the middle value. Even if I had this particular situation where I have repeated numbers, right? If I had 1, 2, 2, that's still 2's in the middle, okay? So we don't have to think about that too hard. It's just the middle number. And in this situation where I've got an even number of data values, we just find the midpoint by averaging the middle two numbers, right? So it's always going to be middle 2.